talk about Act 1, Scene 5, the party scene today in this video. And it's a complicated scene with lots of things going on, so we have a cast of characters here that we're going to use to diagram the scene. So, right down here in the bottom, this beautiful yellow angelic duck that's very innocent and loves everything about everybody is Juliet. This duck with the mask, who looks kind of sinister, maybe the bat duck, but it's Tybalt, the evil villain in the play, who, remember, wanted to fight and kill Benvolio. Peace, I hate the word as I hate hell, all Montagues in thee. This is Rosalind, who never actually speaks in the play, but is Romeo's love interest and the one that is smart enough to realize that Romeo's hormones are out of control. And then this blue duck is Romeo, who is obviously feeling lots of emotions and emo, and he might be substituted for a different duck once he falls in love with Juliet. And then this duck is Mercutio, Romeo's friend, who, if you watched the Scene 4 videos, gave the Queen Mab speech and is the one that's responsible for getting Romeo to come to the party. And Benvolio, who is also responsible for getting Romeo to come to the party and who is anxious to party. And then this is the cousin Capulet at the beginning, who's really old. And then this is Capulet, Juliet's father, who's standing next to the door saying hello to everyone. Thus, that's the perfect duck for that. And this is Shakespeare. And then these are random guests. And then there will be, and then we will probably need a duck for the nurse, but we can just use one of the random guests later on. So that is the cast of characters. So here we go. Here's the scene. So, when the curtains close on Scene 4, Romeo is standing out in the darkness, and Romeo is like, if I go in there, I might die, right? So Romeo at the end of Scene 4 basically says, he that had the steerage of my course, lead my way, because he's going to go into this party knowing that it might cost him. And so he's going to literally cross this threshold into the party. And this is like the hero crossing over into the extraordinary world, because this is the extraordinary world of love. So the scene opens on what might be an empty looking dance hall. And then in the version that you have, there is this set of servants that go running around yelling and trying to get things going. And that would be sort of slapstick humor. But then what would happen next is you would have Capulet, who would be standing next to the door, and the other Capulets are already kind of there, but they're going to let in the guests. So Paris and Juliet are hanging out, and Juliet's kind of wandering around, and Paris is kind of bothering her, and you can tell that Juliet is just not that into Paris. And then you have Tybalt, who's kind of standing disgruntledly over at the corner of the dance floor because he'd rather fight than dance. And then you have all the random guests who start coming in, and they start coming in and they start dancing and things start happening. And then you have this old Capulet guy sitting here, and Capulet is standing next to the door being a host. Oh, and then Rosalind is in there, dancing with everybody. And of course, at that point, you're going to have Benvolio and Mercutio. And when those two guys come in, then the audience is waiting for Romeo to come through. And as these three guys start to come through the door, that's where Capulet's line picks up, where he says, "Welcome, gentlemen, ladies that have their toes unplagued with corns will have a bout with you. Aha, my mistress! Which of you all will now deny to dance? She that makes dainty, she I'll swear hath corns. Am I come near ye now?" And then when he says, "Welcome, gentlemen," he's literally talking to these three. And they have masks on, but they look like you can tell they're like, oh man, is he going to find us out? And he might know that it's Romeo and all that, but here's the thing. Capulet is being a host. He's welcoming everybody, and he's excited, so he doesn't even care if it's Romeo. So he says, "I have seen the day that I have worn a visor and could tell a whispering tale in a fair lady's ear, such as would please. 'Tis gone, 'tis gone, 'tis gone. You are welcome, gentlemen. Come, musicians, play." And then he's like kind of yelling at the servants. "A hall, give room. And then he's talking to all the guests and says, and foot it, girls. And what he's really wanting to do is hype things up, you know? So in a modern kind of setting, this would be the DJ's role, who's got the, you know, the beats going and the whole thing. But in Renaissance time, it's the host. So Capulet's trying to get everything rolling. Now, there is a theme that is connected to this whole thing. And that is when Capulet is saying his lines to these guys who are crashing his party. And these guys are young and they're dumb and they're foolish. And as they come in, Capulet says to them, I have seen the day that I have worn a visor and could tell a whispering tale in a fair lady's ear. So Capulet, who is old, is contrasted with these guys who is young. He wishes he could be out here with them, and he's too old to dance anymore. And then that's emphasized by his cousin Capulet, who comes in, and then Capulet turns to him and sees him standing there, and this is a really old Capulet. He's older than this Capulet, and he says, ah, sirrah, this unlooked for sport comes well, nay, sir, nay, sit, good cousin Capulet. And this is supposed to be funny because he's hyping up the dance and everything, and then he says, oh, hey, cousin, and then this guy's like wanting to go out on the dance floor, and then Capulet's concerned he might break a hip or something, so he's like, no, come back over here. And so that's what's going on there. Now, that's the lines, and you as an audience would see this going on, but you would also see Romeo, and I don't remember, I think this is Rosalind. You would see Romeo who's trying to find Rosalind. And so Romeo is wandering around the dance floor. And remember, all these people have a mask, and he might end up standing right over here. And of course, we know who this guy is. And we know that these two probably shouldn't be standing next to each other. But that's what makes it fun. And from here, he sees, there's Rosalind. And so he starts creeping on Rosalind. And Rosalind's dancing and having a good time. And then suddenly, Rosalind moves a little too much this way, and Romeo sees Juliet. Now, I don't know really where Paris ought to be at this point, but what you would see at the beginning of this scene is that Paris is trying hard to get Juliet's attention, and Juliet's like, haha, that's nice. So Juliet probably sends Paris, sends him away to get a drink or something, and says, hey, Paris, go get me something to drink. And so Paris is out of the way for that. And of course, at that point, Romeo sees Juliet and comes up with the absolute worst love plan of all time. And Romeo says to a servingman, what lady is that which doth enrich the hand of yonder knight? And then the servant says, I know not, sir, because they're all in masks. But then Romeo is looking at Juliet, and he says, oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheek of night like a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear. Beauty too rich for use, for earth too dear. So shows a snowy dove trooping with crows as yonder lady o'er her fellows shows. The measure done, I'll watch her place of stand, and touching hers, make blessed my rude hand. Did my hard love till now forswear its sight, for it ne'er saw true beauty till this night. So, when Romeo says these lines, he's looking at Juliet, and he comes up with the exactly worst love plan of all time. And if you break down the lines, he says, the measure done, I'll watch her place of stand. So he's going to watch, after the dance, Juliet's going to end up over here, and he's going to watch where she ends up. He's going to creep up to her. And then his goal is to grab her hand. He's just going to grab her. That's what he's saying. I will grab her. And now here's where this gets a little bit weird, because Romeo's going to do that. He's going to come over here and grab Juliet, which is really kind of creepy. But the question is, oh, and by the way, Rosalind's forgotten forever. Like, here's Rosalind. She's done. We don't even need her in the play anymore. So Romeo sees Juliet. So there's two ways that you can look at this. One, this is silly. Romeo is looking at Juliet, and his feelings for Juliet are no different than his feelings were for Rosalind, and this is foolishness. Or two, this is really love at first sight. And I think Shakespeare wants to produce it so you look and you see these two characters and you kind of buy into the second, that this really is love at first sight. And so here's how this would work for them. For Romeo, who has been Twitter-pated the entire play and down and depressed and filled with anxiety. When he sees Juliet, his first line about her is, oh. Like, oh, he relaxes. And so the idea of that is, oh, there's the other half of my soul. Oh, what I've been looking for this whole time is right over there. And all I have to do is go over there and grab her hand. And that's some serious confidence, which Romeo doesn't really have serious confidence. So why does he think that's going to work? Because he thinks if she looks at me the way I'm looking at her, she's going to fall in love with me too. And so when Romeo says, oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright, he starts to make his way around the dance floor to creep up on Juliet so that when she ends up over here, he's going to, be right there. Now, when he says, oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright, this character hears what Romeo says and goes, what? And gets angry. And so you can see Tybalt's lines that follow where Tybalt says, this by his voice should be a Montague. Fetch me my rapier, boy. So he grabs some servant walking by. Maybe this guy says, go get me my sword. And then now he's gone. And so now Tybalt is angry and getting ready to fight. So he says, come hither covered with an antic face to fleer and scorn at our solemnity. Now by the stock and honor of my kin to strike him dead, I hold it not a sin. And here's the key line, by the stock and honor of my kin. And if you remember from Act 1, Romeo said, here's much to do with hate, but more with love. Tybalt is motivated. He feels dishonored. He feels the Capulets have been dishonored. So he is going to march off stage. He's going to get his sword. He's going to come back. And then he's going to kill Romeo. He's going to come up and go like that. Except for he's not going to get to, because as he's marching off stage, Capulet, who's still standing next to the door, who might be slightly drunk in some of the versions that you'll see, he's slightly drunk. He sees Tybalt marching off stage and he intercepts him. And so you have this scene that starts where Capulet says, why, how now, kinsman, wherefore storm you so? And then Tybalt, uncle! And then he turns and then Romeo's probably about over here at this point, and he looks and he points across and he says, uncle, this is a Montague, our foe, a villain that is hither come in spite to scorn at our solemnity this night. And then Capulet leans over, looks, and goes, oh, young Romeo is it? And Tybalt says, 'tis he, that villain Romeo. And then Capulet to Tybalt says, content thee, gentle coz. Let him alone. He bears him like a portly gentleman, and to say truth, Verona brags of him to be a virtuous and well-governed youth. I would not for the wealth of all this town here in my house do him disparagement. Therefore be patient. Take no note of him. It is my will, the which if thou respect should show a fair presence and put off these frowns and ill-beseeming semblance for a feast. So basically Capulet's saying to Tybalt, hey, relax. And the first time we saw Capulet, he was really, really mad and he was in the middle of the feud. But remember, since then, he has had a meeting with the prince and he's met with Paris and he wants everything to go well because he wants Juliet to be happy with Paris. And so, Capulet's like, leave him alone. And Tybalt, who's too angry to do that, says, it fits when such a villain is a guest. I'll not endure him. And now Capulet gets mad. And when Capulet loses his temper, it's bad. So he's like, oh, you can't disrespect me. So Capulet gets bad and says, he shall be endured. What, goodman boy? I say he shall. Go to. Am I the master here? Or you go to? You'll not endure him. God shall mend my soul. You'll make a mutiny among my guests. You'll set a carcahoo. You'll be the man. And then Tybalt responds, why, uncle, 'tis a shame. And then Capulet, go to. You are a saucy boy. And there might be some physical violence where he, smacks Tybalt around too. But he's like, you are a saucy boy. And the ironic thing is as Capulet is facing Tybalt and getting mad at him, Romeo's moving in on his daughter. And so you see that all kind of happening there. And then this is where the physical violence comes in. This trick make chance to scathe you? I know what, you must contrary me. And then everybody starts to see, like some of these guests, they start to see what's going on over there. And, Tybalt's embarrassed. And then Capulet turns back to the crowd and starts smiling again. And is like, oh, ha ha, well said, my hearts. And then turns back to Tybalt. You are a princox, go. Be quiet, or, and then to the servants. More light, more light. And then he dismisses Tybalt. And now Tybalt is quivering with rage, and he comes up to where the audience is. He looks at everybody, and he says, patience put forth with willful choler meeting makes my flesh tremble in their different greeting. I will withdraw, but this intrusion shall now seeming sweet convert to bitterest gall. And you get the sense that he's humiliated, he's angry, and because he's the villain, we haven't seen the last of him, and so he goes marching off stage. And we know that Tybalt intends harm to Romeo, and now Tybalt's gone. And of course, right at that moment, Romeo makes his way and ends up right next to Juliet. And now you could move them so they're out of the dance floor, and everything's happening over here, and Benvolio's dancing with the lively Helena, and so forth. And Paris comes back and looks around and like, hey, where'd Juliet go? And so all this is happening, and that the two of them are separated from the whole crowd. And then Romeo says to Juliet, here, let's hold them like this. If I profane with my most unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this. My lips to blessing pilgrims ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. So Romeo reaches out and grabs Juliet. She turns and looks at him like, what are you doing? And then he says, I'm sorry if I offended you by grabbing you, and I will apologize by kissing you. And here's the thing, you would think those lines would not work on Juliet. And they probably shouldn't, because Juliet ends up looking like she's about to get offended, but then she makes eye contact with Romeo. And here's the thing, here's Juliet, who was not interested in Paris, not interested in the dance, not interested in love, and she looks at Romeo and she sees the other half of her soul. And that's the idea of this, that if you're gonna like the love theme, the actors that play these two characters would have to sell that right now in this scene. And so now Juliet responds kind of playfully. Good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much, which mannerly devotion shows in this, for saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss. And then Romeo, have not saints' lips and holy palmers too? So Romeo is anxious to kiss her, and then Juliet is kind of playing coy, so she's like, no, I don't think you're going to kiss me, Romeo. I don't even know your name. And says, I pilgrim lips that they must use in prayer. And then Romeo, who's pretty suave here, says, oh, then dear saint, let lips do what hands do. And he reaches his hand out and touches Juliet's hand. They pray, grant thou less turn to despair. Grant thou less faith turn to despair. And then now this is getting very, hot and heavy. And then Juliet looks at Romeo and says, saints do not move, though grant for prayer's sake. And then Romeo says, then move not while my prayer's effect I take. And he kisses her. Like that. And now here's the thing. At this point, Juliet doesn't know what to do. Romeo doesn't know what to do. And so Juliet says, and you would have it where Juliet would very innocently be like touching her lips. She's, pretty surprised and shocked, but also entirely in love. And so she says, saints do not, And then she says, then have my lips the sin that they have took. And they're carrying on this idea of, hey, Juliet, you're a church. And he's like, well, you're a pilgrim. And then what do pilgrims do? Well, they go to church. And then, we just prayed. And so there's this like love religion thing going on. And now Juliet says, well, now your sin is on my lips. And then Romeo says, sin from my lips, so trespass sweetly urged, give me my sin again. And he kisses her again. And of course, at this point, Juliet says, you kiss by the book, and then that's too much hot and heavy because now they're interrupted by the nurse. We'll have somebody come over to be the nurse. And the nurse comes over here and sees the two of them together, and Juliet stands away from Romeo, and the nurse is, not the smartest tool in the shed, or the sharpest tool in the shed, but she looks and says, whoa, what's going on over here? And then Juliet's like, ha. And then the nurse is like, your mother wants you. And so now the nurse drags Juliet away so that the mother, let's say this is Lady Capulet, And so they can talk to the mother about Paris. Poor Paris, man, because Paris is over here trying to be nice, and Juliet is looking over there where Romeo was. And now there's this separation, and now the party's gonna end. And as the party ends, Romeo's leaving, and Juliet's like, whoa, where did he go? So she sends the nurse over to see who this guy is, because they don't know each other. And Romeo is like, who's that girl? And so then they both want to know each other. And of course, that's when they find out that this is a Montague, this is a Capulet, and then we'll talk about that in the next video.